Hello, 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 chat. J'espère que vous allez bien. On est parti. Genre, je vous dis un truc. Hein. J'ai pas regardé la dernière vidéo de Wolf parce que je me suis dit, on va la regarder ensemble. Je me suis dit, attends, il y a une vidéo de Wolf, elle a l'air sympa. Je la regarde avec le chat. Là, c'était les trois trucs qu'il nous fallait. C'était les trois trucs qu'il nous fallait. Hmm.
There is an ability in competitive Pokemon that, if it ever became popular, could single-handedly ruin the game. Imagine a world where you can't trust what you see, where everything might be an illusion. A world where sight, the first line of defense against lurking dangers, is turned against you. Your own eyes leading you down a tunnel that never ends. In this world, seeing isn't believing. In this universe, nothing is guaranteed. Every moment is spent holding your breath, trying to fight a threat that you cannot see, but you know is there. Or maybe it isn't. You're fighting two battles, the threat itself and the fear. It might sound dramatic, but it's true. There is a Pokemon ability that makes this nightmare world a reality. Sinister
Je crois que j'ai vu en plus un extrait où il jouait justement
doesn't come to the
son truc.
battle. There is one bastion of safety against this era of paranoia. The fact that only one Pokemon gets this ability, and nobody thinks that this Pokemon is very good. Unfortunately for them, I think they're wrong. This is the story of Illusion, an Hisuian Zoroark. But unfortunately for you, dear viewer, this intro itself is an illusion. Because before we can talk about Zoroark, we have to first talk about the greatest city on Earth, Milwaukee. Wisconsin. The Milwaukee Regional Championships will be my first in-person event following last season's World Championships. They're also the only event I will attend for the first 6 months of this season. And so if I want to have even a chance to qualify for the World Championships this year, I'm going to have to do well. Unfortunately, this is a difficult task for two main reasons. First, there are over 700 players competing. Second, the format just changed from the one I spent months trying to master in the lead up to Worlds. Unlike that high-power, explosive format where legendaries dominate, this new format is the complete opposite, because every single legendary and paradox Pokemon is banned. This is the same format that we played in the months following the World Championships in 2024, and I think it's a lot of fun. But the truth is that I have not touched it in nearly a year, and I've got zero good ideas that I'm sitting on to start building a team. But while I might not have anything cooking, I have a friend going to Milwaukee who just might have something spicy that has been simmering. Allow me to introduce you to Dr. Aaron Traylor. Aaron and I have been friends since 2011. He's an incredible Pokemon player and one of the single best people I know. We've worked on teams together countless times over the years, and those collaborations have often taken us to the peak of the game. But after a disappointing finish at the 2023 World Championships, we each went on our own individual journeys, honing our skills and working on our weak points on our own. Now it's time to come together once more. With no time to spare, we get started. I send Aaron a list of 27 Pokemon that to me seem underexplored. There's a lot of Pokemon on here that I think have potential. Titan, Espathra, Hisuian Braviary, Porygon Z. But out of everything, there's one Pokemon that stands out to him more than all the rest. Hisuian Zoroark. Now, Hisuian Zoroark is not normally thought to be a very good Pokemon. It fits into this archetype of Pokemon that typically struggle in competitive play, which is fast and frail attackers who try to move before the opponent and do massive damage. In general, I would say that these Pokemon need some sort of X factor to boost their attacking prowess in order to make them worth using. The problem with Hisuian Zoroark is that while it is both fast and strong, it's neither fast or strong enough to justify using it. Faster Pokemon can knock it out in one hit, and although it does outspeed a lot of Pokemon in the format, most of them are tanky enough to survive a hit and then to KO Zoroark in return. And as such, Hisuian Zoroark is seeing almost zero usage. But both Aaron and I think it not only has potential, but could actually win this tournament. Why? Well, the truth is that different aspects of Zoroark appeal to each of us. For me,
Zoroark, ça peut être fort, mais c'est compliqué à mettre en place en fait. Zoroark, je pense, ça peut être très très fort, mais c'est compliqué à mettre en place.
Aaron, on the other hand, is interested in something else. Hisuian Zoroark's unique typing. As the only ghost and normal type Pokemon, Hisuian Zoroark is the one Pokemon in the game that is completely immune to both fighting moves and ghost type moves. That's relevant because one of the single best Pokemon in this format is Annihilate, a fighting and ghost type that's able to even KO Pokemon that resist it, given that it has enough time to set up. Unfortunately for them, no matter how many boosts Annihilate gets, it will never be able to do even a single point of damage to Hisuian Zoroark. But once again, I'm afraid that everything that I've just told you about Zoroark is a bit of magician's redirection, as I ask you to pay no attention to the elephant behind the curtain. The truth is that neither its typing nor its move pool is the most interesting thing about Hisuian Zoroark. That honor is bestowed upon its ability, Illusion. I would say that it is arguably the single most evil ability present in Scarlet and Violet. Illusion is simple enough to understand. Whenever Zoroark is sent out, it disguises itself as another Pokemon on your team, and there's no way for your opponent to tell them apart. Specifically, it disguises itself as whichever the last Pokemon you have in your party is, so you get to choose. Now, I mentioned that fast and frail attackers like Zoroark usually need some kind of X factor, and in theory, that should be Illusion. In a perfect world, Illusion buys you extra chances to attack and do more damage. But if it actually worked in practice, then Zoroark would have some results.
Okay, sorry.
In fact, doesn't Zoroark having nearly 0 tournament finishes kind of imply that Illusion is not some grand magician's Las Vegas act, but instead closer to like an amateur magician at a kid's birthday party? Now, it's true that Illusion might not have effects that are as immediately powerful as some of the game's most iconic abilities. But make no mistake, this ability is far more dangerous and more frustrating than it would appear at first glance. With Illusion in play, every move becomes a gamble. Want to use Fake Out in front of a susceptible target? Well, if that's Zoroark, you just wasted your attack. Want to go for a close combat to KO a Pokemon that's weak to fighting moves? Better think twice. Maybe you think your Ghost-type Gholdengo is safe to go for a Nasty Plot. Think again. Without even factoring in half of what Zoroark can do, you can already see how quickly things can devolve. And trust me, it gets so much worse. The theory is there, so Aaron and I decide to try and build around this diabolical ability. We quickly realize that this is not a task for the unmotivated. Building with Zoroark is an emotional roller coaster, punctuated by the moments of oh-so-wicked greatness when an opponent trips over themselves playing Find the Zoroark. And it's a good thing that we have these peaks, because otherwise, it's all valleys. Team after team falls flat on its face, as we're met with seemingly endless messages that Zoroark really is a fraud, that there's a good reason that this Pokemon isn't performing, and that reason is because it's bad. But even when I want to give up and try building around a different Pokemon, these moments of trickery, they just keep us hooked. Aaron and I keep working, and over a few weeks of laborious team building, the terrain finally smooths out. Before we know it, we're careening uphill, leapfrogging off of one Zoroark bamboozlement to the next. And although it's evil, it's a lot of fun. Despite things looking pretty bad for a lot of the prep time, I can now confidently say that we've done it. We've built a team that makes use of the single most evil Pokemon in the format. This is the team we'll be bringing to the Milwaukee Regional Championships, featuring none other than Hisuian Zoroark. Hisuian Zoroark is the single most difficult Pokemon that I have ever built around. This isn't even because it's a bad Pokemon, but because it restricts your options in a way that no other Pokemon does. Compare Zoroark to Weezing, whose neutralizing gas ability disables all other abilities while Weezing is on the field. At a glance, this probably seems like more of a pain to work around than Zoroark's Illusion. But in practice, that's not actually the case. With Weezing, you're limited to using Pokemon that don't need to use their abilities, or to Pokemon whose abilities only activate on switch-in, or to Pokemon that are holding the Ability Shield item. When you get down to it, that's actually a lot of Pokemon. But more importantly, the only thing that you need to actually consider is the abilities of these Pokemon. Now, let's look at Zoroark. If you disguise Zoroark as any Pokemon that has an ability that activates when the Pokemon is sent out, you immediately blow your cover. However, you can also dispel your illusion by disguising Zoroark as any Pokemon with an ability that interacts with your opponent's abilities. For example, Defiant Kingambit or Annihilate being sent out against your opponent's Incineroar. This is also true of certain items, such as the Clear Amulet. All of this is also true of the Pokemon that you aren't disguising as Zoroark as well. Leading Incineroar next to Zoroark immediately tells your opponent that there's only one Pokemon they need to worry about being an illusion. For this team to work, we need to not only disguise Zoroark well, but we need to make it as hard for our opponents as possible to figure out where and if Zoroark is hiding. Now, every single thing that I've talked about so far has only been about how to disguise Zoroark. It hasn't actually been about winning the game in any way. Disguising Zoroark correctly doesn't really matter if you can't actually do anything with the ambiguity that you've created.
C'est vrai,
Figuring out the illusion minigame is important,
le caches
but
bien,
not as important as
mais
treating
que ça
Zoroark
te
like
sert
a
à rien,
Pokemon that will actually do something.
c'est un
To
peu
achieve
nul,
this,
quoi.
we need to find partners that can both be disguised as Zoroark and can be on the field next to Zoroark and can be on the field with each other, with Zoroark not present. And every combination of this little triangle has to work
compliqué.
well together. And that's not even everything, because I haven't told you yet about the hardest condition of all. See, the most common move in the game is called Protect. It fully shields the user from all damage and effects for the turn. If you're worried that your opponent might have Zoroark on the field, all you have to do to check is protect both of your Pokemon to see which move they use. Because while Zoroark can disguise its appearance, it cannot disguise its moves. If you protect in front of a Zoroark, chances are that next you'll be able to say, I don't remember Whimsicott learning Bitter Malice, and just like that, you've solved the case.
Je vois. C'est très dur. C'est compliqué. Je sais pas pourquoi il se fait du mal comme ça.
And do all of this while somehow stopping your opponent from protecting. Maybe you can see why team building was giving Aaron and I so much trouble. To figure it out, we first needed to determine just what we wanted Zoroark to do. And honestly, out of everything, this is the easy part. The first place to start is with its moves. Protect, Bitter Malice, Icy Wind, and Taunt.
Bitter
Malice is Zoroark's signature move. While it is technically slightly
Attends, ça baisse l'attaque par un stage et c'est 75%. Oh, c'est bien. Ok, c'est un support. C'est un support malicieux. Un support malicieux.
Icy Wind hits both opponents, does a little damage, and lowers their speeds. The reason that this is so important is because Zoroark is actually 1 point faster than Alolan Ninetales, who has been dominating tournaments with the Focus Sash item. Zoroark can outspeed Ninetales, use Icy Wind to break the Focus Sash, and lower its speed at the same time, which allows a partner to pick up the KO before Ninetales can move. Rounding out the moveset is Protect to keep Zoroark safe, and Taunt to stop Trick Room teams and Amoonguss, as well as to lock our opponents out of other options in a pinch. Focus Sash is our item of choice, and it allows Zoroark to not worry so much about its rather poor bulk, instead letting us focus all of its training and its speed and special attack. Lastly, Aaron and I decided that Terra Ghost was the best Terra type, because it allows Zoroark to one-hit KO opposing Gholdengo. I hatched like 300 eggs trying to get a shiny Zoroark, but eventually I gave up. I could have done more, but I was getting annoyed, and also I was worried it was going to take away from like actually preparing. I nicknamed my Zoroark Surprise! The nickname doesn't show up properly until after Zoroark's disguise is broken, and I thought that was pretty funny. Okay, now's where things get difficult, because we need to start picking partners. The good news is that there is one clear, standout choice, and it happens to be one of the best Pokemon in the game. Ursaluna Blood Moon. Nicknamed by Evil Frank, because the regular Ursaluna that I ran at Worlds was nicknamed Franklin, and Evil Frank is his brother, who is evil.
Moi, je crois... Attends, dans ma team, je l'ai... Ursaluna Blood Moon dans ma team, très cool.
Not only super broken, it also doesn't activate on a switch-in or react to any of our opponent's abilities.
Ok, c'est pas mal, c'est pour ça, c'est bien.
Weak to the fighting moves that we want to bait our opponent into using with Zoroark. And its potential to deal huge damage makes it a popular fake-out target, where Zoroark's ghost typing becomes useful yet again. It also pairs well with Zoroark thanks to its absurd damage output. Its signature move, Blood Moon, is almost as strong as Hyper Beam, and it doesn't even take a turn to recharge. It's made stronger because normally the best type to take normal attacks is Ghost, because they're immune. But thanks to Mind's Eye, the bear does not concern itself with immunities. The two types that resist normal are Steel and Rock, both of which happen to be weak to Earth Power, making Ursaluna nearly impossible to withstand. Rounding out the moveset is Hyper Voice, which does shocking damage and hits both foes at the same time, and of course Protect to help keep Ursaluna safe. To maximize Ursaluna's damage output, we're using both the Life Orb item and a Terra type of Normal. When these multipliers are paired with the already absurdly strong Blood Moon, pretty much any Pokemon that doesn't resist it will go down in a single hit. Sometimes Ursaluna is trained to be slow and bulky, but not this one. In order to combo with Icy Wind, my Ursaluna is trained to be as fast as possible, allowing it to outspeed Rillaboom and Peladon after a speed drop. This is nice because Ursaluna will then kill them in a single hit, even if they're holding the Assault Vest. Even though Ursaluna does pair well with Zoroark, the two of them have a problem. They don't actually do anything to discourage your opponent from protecting, which, of course, is where Whimsicott comes in. Whimsicott gives the team a second and more reliable form of speed control thanks to its Prankster ability. Prankster causes all moves that don't do damage to act with an increased stage of priority. Moves with increased priority act before all other moves, no matter how fast the Pokemon using them is. Whimsicott's most most important move is Tailwind, which will double my team's speeds for the next 4 turns, allowing Ursaluna to outspeed nearly every Pokemon in the format. Whimsicott also gets Fake Tears, which cuts the special defense of anything it hits in half. And if you thought Ursaluna was strong before, just wait until you see it doing doubled damage. Moonblast lets Whimsicott do damage on its own, but the set really shines when you consider its final move, Encore. Encore forces whatever it hits to use the last move that it used again for the next 3 turns. And thanks to the Prankster ability, it'll almost always land before the opponent can switch moves. The presence of Encore means that the normally safe tactic of protecting suddenly becomes incredibly risky, because you do not want to get stuck using Protect turn after turn. Even without Protect in the mix, it's really risky to play passively in front of Whimsicott, because if you don't do any damage while Tailwind is set up, then Fake Tears becomes a massive threat, pairing with both Ursaluna and Zoroark. Whimsicott pressures opponents to go on the offensive or else risk losing massive ground. And in doing so, it sets Zoroark up to set up for surprise KOs. It is the Pokemon that I will disguise Zoroark as the most over the course of this tournament.
Ok.
Fake Tears also happens to be the reason why my Whimsicott is nicknamed So Sad Winky Face. Whimsicott's holding the Covert Cloak item to ensure that it doesn't have to worry about Fake Out. Terra Fire is used to not only resist fire moves from Sun teams, but also the Steel type move Make It Rain from Goldengo. Speaking of, the final Pokemon completing the core 4 of this team is none other than Mr. Moneybags himself, Goldengo. I do not like Goldengo. It is a stupid, overpowered, broken Pokemon. But even though I technically can beat him, sometimes it's good to join him anyway. Now, Goldengo is a weaker Pokemon to disguise Zoroark as than either Whimsicott or Ursaluna Blood Moon. It doesn't pressure the opponent to make risky attacks in the same way that Whimsicott does, and it doesn't bait fighting moves or Fake Out like Ursaluna does. However, Goldengo is a better partner to have on the field next to Zoroark than either Whimsicott or Ursaluna. Remember earlier how I told you that I could use Zoroark's Icy Wind attack to drop Ninetales' speed and then KO it before it could move? Well, Whimsicott is not strong enough to KO Ninetales, and Ursaluna isn't fast enough to outspeed it after a speed drop. And that's where Goldengo comes in. Its signature move, Make It Rain, is one of the single best moves added in Scarlet and Violet, hitting both foes and dealing massive damage. It can also use Shadow Ball to hit opposing Goldengo for super effective. Protect keeps it safe, but its most dangerous move is actually one that doesn't do any damage at all. Nasty Plot. See, Make It Rain drops Goldengo's special attack by 1 stage whenever it hits something, and Nasty Plot increases your special attack by 2 stages whenever it's used. So you can use this to either remove the drops from Make It Rain, or to boost up before attacking in the first place. Goldengo also combos with Zoroark's Bitter Malice, which can weaken foes' attack stats while Goldengo sets up. Nasty Plot also applies immense pressure on your opponents to not protect, as if you don't do any damage when Goldengo sets up, you can easily lose the game. Goldengo's holding the Metal Coat item to
je vois. Donc il force à ne pas se protect avec le Pokémon là pour que après qui doit attaquer, il est obligé d'attaquer, et du coup ça le force encore plus à faire des erreurs et à taper le Zoroark au cas où quoi. C'est pas bête, le mec il part, le mec il pense à tout.
But I didn't have one, so I want to say a big thank you to my friend Billa for lending this one to me, because I didn't want to collect another 999 coins, and I also didn't have a shiny Goldengo sitting around. It's nicknamed Layla, which I'm pretty sure is the name of my friend Yotom's cat. I got this from Billa, it was already nicknamed. I don't know why it's nicknamed after Yotom's cat. Yotom, if you're watching this, you can let me know. Now, these 4 Pokemon form a very scary, complete core, where any Pokemon can be Zoroark or can be on the field next to Zoroark. But these 4 Pokemon also have some pretty big weaknesses. The single biggest issue is King Gambit. Many of them will run the Assault Vest item, which is kind of tough when I have 4 special attackers on the team. And even beyond that, Goldengo, Whimsicott, and Zoroark all can't damage King Gambit at all, regardless of whether or not they're holding the Assault Vest. Even worse, every one of Zoroark's moves that do any damage also drop one of your foe's stats, meaning that Zoroark can't even attack without activating King Gambit's Defiant ability. The other weakness for the team right now is Trick Room teams. Since Trick Room flips the speed order around, it turns both Tailwind and Icy Wind against my team. And so, the 5th Pokemon added to the team is none other than the greatest Pokemon ever made. Incineroar. Now, you're watching a video, so you're probably not surprised to see Incineroar on the team. But based on everything that I've told you thus far, you might be surprised to see Incineroar on this.
Oui, parce qu'il a intimidation.
Incineroar does help against Trick Room teams, as they normally rely on strong Psychic and Fire type moves to do burst damage. But the other criteria? What about Zoroark? Well, it's true that you cannot disguise Zoroark as Incineroar. Its Intimidate ability activates on switch-in, which would immediately shatter the illusion, assuming your opponent's paying attention. But remember that in every battle, you always get a choice for which Pokemon you disguise Zoroark as. With 2 Pokemon in the back at the start of the game, and Zoroark always taking the form of the last Pokemon in your party, I am never forced to disguise Zoroark as Incineroar. In other words, because Zoroark can be disguised as every other Pokemon on this team, I will never end up getting stuck doing a bad Incineroar impression. Incineroar and Zoroark together also isn't a very good lead, so that issue isn't a big deal either. But what about Kingambit? Well, on paper, Incineroar looks pretty good against the Supreme Overlord.
Ouais, mais
With its
c'est pas
Fire
ouf.
and Dark typing, it resists Kingambit's Dark and Steel type moves. The issue, of course, is the abilities. Kingambit's Defiant ability gives it 2 stages of attack increase whenever one of its stats is lowered. And Incineroar's Intimidate ability lowers both of your opponent's attack stats every time it switches in. If Incineroar switches in against Kingambit, it gives over a +1 attack boost. And trust me, you do not want to deal with attack-boosted Kingambit. But there is a way for Incineroar to turn this interaction against Kingambit, to cause this unavoidable ability dance to swing in the cat's favor. See, a new item was introduced in Scarlet and Violet that, I must admit, I have pretty much only used to get egg moves on existing Pokemon. But as it turns out, it actually does something in battle too. It's called the Mirror Herb, and its effect is simple. Once per battle, when your opponent gets a stat boost, consume the herb and get that same stat boost for yourself. If Incineroar is holding the Mirror Herb, suddenly it's Kingambit who needs to be careful, because the interaction plays out differently. Incineroar is sent out.
Il baisse de 1, il monte de 2, du coup il a plus 1, mais Inci il a plus 2.
Giving Kingambit a +2 boost, leaving it with a net of +1 attack. And then Mirror Herb activates, copying only the Defiant +2 boost, not the final +1 that Kingambit ends with. This means that Incineroar has now doubled its attack stat and can cleanly one-hit KO Kingambit. Incineroar is running a standard moveset of Fake Out, Parting Shot, Knockoff, and Flare Blitz.
Je vois, c'est pas bête, c'est pas bête.
Bulky Incineroar spread, this one is giga fast. It's so fast that with Tailwind active, it'll outspeed most Dragapult and +1 speed Dragonite. It'll also outspeed most Ursaluna and Ursaluna Blood Moon outside of Tailwind, letting me knock off or Parting Shot before they can move. The rest of the stat points are distributed to let it survive Sneasler Close Combat after an Intimidate and Ursaluna Blood Moon Earth Power. Aaron and I decided to use Terra Ghost for the immunity to Fake Out and Fighting type moves. This can pair really well with Encore and Whimsicott because you can Encore them into a fighting move as you Terra Ghost and then end up immune. Now the game will not let me nickname Incineroar because the one that I'm using is the special mystery gift one that was distributed after I won EUIC last season. Those of you up to date on the lore already know that this is officially, canonically, my Pokemon. Whenever you send it out in battle, the game tells you with the title Wolf's Incineroar. And if you're curious, I think the reason that you can't nickname it is because otherwise when you send it out, you would say like go and then the nickname of the Pokemon, but it would still have the title Wolf's. So you could say stuff like go, Wolf's left calf. And you can probably imagine that there are some things that you can say that they don't want you saying. Anyway, with only 1 Pokemon slot left in the team, Aaron and I were stumped. The issue is that we needed a Pokemon that can resist water moves, but even with Incineroar's special herb, we also still needed more for Kingambit. We tried so many Pokemon: Azumarill, Flamigo, Sneasler, Poliwrath, Como, Tauros Aqua, Tauros Blaze, but nothing worked. I really thought Azumarill was going to work. I really thought Flamigo was going to work, but neither of them did. We needed Keldeo. We needed Urshifu. Anyway, as it turns out, when you want to resist both water and dark type moves and Urshifu is not around, it seems like the Pokemon that you're looking at just aren't as good as you need them to be. Which is why, eventually, we realized that we weren't going to get a Pokemon that resists both water and dark type moves. At least, not at the same time. But, as it turns out, as long as it can resist both of them some of the time, that was good enough. Allow me to introduce you to the final Pokemon on the team, Dragonite. Blah. Dragonite is one of the best Pokemon in the current format. Not only does it have good bulk and a great attack stat, but it's been given a number of great new tools in the last few generations. Most importantly is the new move Scale Shot, and the new item
Scale Shot c'est trop fort. C'est trop fort.
Between 2 and 5 times.
C'est pour ça que tout le monde le joue Dragonite en ce moment, parce que c'est beaucoup trop fort.
And for context, 5 hits of Scale Shot is stronger than Outrage. And even only 4 hits, which is the low roll option, is roughly as strong as Life Orb Dragon Claw. The speed boost means that Dragonite can run away with the game as it becomes essentially outspeeding even the fastest Pokemon in the format. The defense drop is also offset somewhat by Dragonite's ability Multiscale, which cuts all damage taken in half as long as Dragonite is at full HP. With its Dragon typing, extra bulk from Multiscale, and ramping speed, Dragonite is a strong choice to help with the rain teams that have been giving Aaron and I some trouble. And that is all well and good, but what about the other problem? What about Cringe Gambit? Well, here's where our Dragonite diverges from the more standard ones of the format. Normally, the last two moves that Dragonite uses are Tailwind for speed control and Haze to remove stat boosts and stat drops. Haze is useful for like opposing setup Pokemon like Dondozo, but it's also good because you can clear your own stat drops, which you're going to be getting from lowering your defense with Scale Shot and maybe Intimidate from opposing Incineroar. However, this team already has Whimsicott for Tailwind, so Dragonite doesn't need Tailwind as well, and with Fake Tears, Intimidate, Nasty Plot, Bitter Malice, and Icy Wind all present on the team, Haze feels like it's likely to do more good for the opponent than for us. So suddenly, Dragonite has 2 move slots left open. One of them will dedicate to Extreme Speed.
Extreme Speed, obligé. Obligé, c'est trop fort.
Finish off low HP foes, and it can also be used to attack before Sucker Punch from King Gambit, which will cause the move to fail. This is going to be relevant in a second, trust me, because Extreme Speed is not very effective against the Steel-type King Gambit. But that's not the case for Dragonite's final move, Low Kick. Low Kick is almost never used on Dragonite, and certainly never used on multi-scale, scale shot, loaded dice Dragonite. But the thing is, I think it's exactly what we need here. It's a fighting type move that does more damage the heavier the target is. And as it turns out, when you put King Gambit on the scale,
King Gambit,
the chair. Because both King Gambit types are weak to fighting, Low Kick will always KO. Unless, of course, they Terrasilize. While the most common Terra type for King Gambit is Dark, and Dark is still weak to fighting, turns out that cutting your damage taken in half is enough to keep King Gambit alive. Unless, of course, Dragonite also Terrastalizes. And in this case, the Terra type of choice is none other than Fighting. Terra Fighting Dragonite Low Kick does enough damage to Terra Dark King Gambit that it doesn't KO. But after they Terrastalize Dark, they lose the Steel typing, and that means that Extreme Speed can then finish it off. Fighting also is nice because it gives Dragonite a Dark resistance. We don't have to be as afraid of Sucker Punch. Terra Fighting Low Kick has some other uses as well, like you can KO the Ursalunas, and you can use it to let Dragonite resist the Rock type moves from Tyranitar and Excadrill that are actually kind of annoying for this team. This moveset is really weird and not very standard, but it is a specific kit designed for this specific team, and it ends up tying everything together, being the perfect final Pokemon. Dragonite is trained to be as fast and as strong as possible, and is nicknamed #1 Geo Fan, after my friend, Edner, and incredible documentarian, Geo. Dragonite's his favorite Pokemon, I think. I'm pretty sure. Dragonite has the title, the Sleepy. Fun fact, it took me 30 minutes to get the shiny marked Dragonite, and another 30 minutes to get shiny marked Whimsicott, but 3 hours wasn't enough to get a single shiny Zoroark. I'm still a little pissed. As Aaron and I were putting the final touches on the team, we actually realized that this is exactly the style of team that our friend Yuki really enjoys using. Yuki's going to Milwaukee, but he didn't have much time to prepare for the tournament due to being super busy with work. So about 2 weeks before the tournament, we sent him what we'd been working on and asked if he wanted to use it. And he thought it looked good, so he said yes. Now, if you want to use the team yourself, you can do so using the rental code that's on screen here. As for me, it's time for the tournament. This tournament is using a slightly different structure compared to last season. There's still 8 rounds on the first day, and if I want to advance, I need to win at least 6 of them to make it to day 2. But now, on day 2, there is now an extra round, meaning in this tournament, I'll be playing 4 rounds instead of 3. In order to make it to the final bracket, I need to win 10 out of my first 12 games. In a high-variance game like Pokemon, this is not super easy. Now, the etymology of the name Milwaukee is unclear, but some sources suggest that it comes from an Algonquin word meaning the good land. It's an assessment that I agree with. After all, it's the greatest city on Earth. But unfortunately for Milwaukee, I'm not visiting on the side of good. Aaron, Yuki, and I head to Milwaukee, wielding one of the most evil teams I've ever built. Or that someone built. You assumed you've been listening to Wolf Glick this entire time. But that too was an illusion. This is the story of how I, Wolf Glick, tricked a Pokemon tournament.
Mais est-ce que ça a vraiment... Parce que j'ai vu un de ces matchs, justement quand il jouait Latina, mais je sais plus s'il avait été loin ou pas.
So fear, Discord, and Skype throughout this unsuspecting venue. Right now, before round 1 has begun, our competitors don't know what bitter malice lurks among them. But once the games begin, word will spread like wildfire, consuming the minds of our peers. As round 1 goes up, I head to my seat and chat with my opponent, and learn that it is their first tournament ever. Hopefully, it'll be a memorable intro to tournament play. As the match starts, I take a look at what I'll be facing off against. and see some familiar faces. Hisuian Arcanine,
Oh,
Rillaboom, Grassy Seed
Alolan.
Goldengo, Sneasler, and Alolan Ninetales are all present on another successful team, and the main difference is that the last Pokemon here is Hydreigon. Game 1 starts with my Ursaluna and Whimsicott against their Ninetales and Hydreigon. But wait, are my eyes to be believed? Is one of these Pokemon not what they appear? It's time, dear viewers, to play a little game that I like to call Is It Zoroark? Get your votes in quick. All right, ready for the reveal? Let's see how turn 1 plays out. Ursaluna terrestrializes to normal as Whimsicott goes for Tailwind. Hydreigon gets sent to the Shadow Realm via the Blood Moon Express, as Ninetales goes for an Icy Wind. In this case, it was not Zoroark. Thank you for playing. My opponent sends out Rillaboom. I switch Ursaluna Blood Moon to Goldengo and break Ninetales' Focus Sash with Moonblast as they KO Whimsicott. But now I have both Goldengo and Ursaluna together inside of Tailwind. I KO both my opponent's Pokemon and finish the game by getting speed control with the Icy Wind Zoroark, who was waiting in the back. But tournament sets are best 2 out of 3, so I'm not done yet. Game 2 begins with my Whimsicott and Goldengo against my opponents Rillaboom and Arcanine. Are you ready for another round of Is It Zoroark? What do you think, folks? Surely Zoroark will be in the lead this time, right? Let's watch the turn 1. Goldengo protects, but the next Pokemon to move is Whimsicott, who uses Bitter Malice? That's not Whimsicott. It does over half to Rillaboom, and my opponent launches 2 attacks into Goldengo's Protect, thinking that they didn't have to worry about Whimsicott doing any damage. Now I can Water Terra Goldengo and KO Rillaboom with another Bitter Malice, as Rock Slide hits both my Pokemon and Goldengo goes for a Nasty Plot. Sneasler comes out and uses Coaching on Arcanine as I Bitter Malice it, and Arcanine finishes off Zoroark. Now though, I can go into the true Whimsicott and set Tailwind
Oh la la.
my boosted Goldengo to run away with the game. I win
Monstreux.
round 1. Round 2 is going to be harder, because my opponent has a Pokemon that is a real pain, Flamigo. With its Scrappy ability, it can hit Ghost-type Pokemon with fighting moves. And it's also immune to Intimidate. What this means is that it hits 5 of my Pokemon for super effective damage, and I can't lower its damage output with Incineroar. Worse, this team has a Trick Room mode with Incineroar, Porygon 2, regular Ursaluna, and Amoonguss. But it also has Goldengo for an out of Trick Room mode too. Especially given the Flamigo has Tailwind, this looks really tough. Game 1 begins with my Ursaluna and Goldengo against their Goldengo and Incineroar. They switch Goldengo out immediately, as I terrestrialize my Goldengo to water, and reveal that my Ursaluna is not what it seems with a Bitter Malice. I Nasty Plot as they knock off my Zoroark, putting it to 5 HP. This is a great position, but I get greedy. I call that Flamigo will protect, and go for an Icy Wind and a second Nasty Plot. This lets them go for a close combat onto Goldengo, and KO Zoroark in the same turn with knockoff. The damage is too bad. On the next turn, I KO Incineroar and Flamigo protects. But while this looks good, it's actually not, because my opponent sends out Goldengo to replace Incineroar, and that means that I can no longer KO both my opponent's Pokemon this turn. They terrestrialize their Goldengo, as I Tailwind and Protect, but they Tailwind as well, calling out my defensive play as they KO my Whimsicott. And now all I have left are Ursaluna and Goldengo, and no speed advantage. Unfortunately, their Goldengo is faster than mine, and it uses that
Aïe,
speed to
aïe,
KO
aïe,
my
aïe,
Goldengo.
aïe, ça c'est
Down
seul.
1 against
Ça, c'est
3,
seul.
I lose game 1. And against this type of team, that's especially worrying. Game 2 begins with a new lead from my opponent, Porygon 2 and Flamigo, against my Ursaluna and Goldengo once more. Last time, Ursaluna was secretly Zoroark. But what about now? The turn begins, and this time, I'm going after Flamigo early. Ursaluna is the first to move with Icy Wind, letting Goldengo move next and launch a Make It Rain as they Ice Beam Zoroark in exchange. They send out Goldengo. We both terrestrialize to water as I taunt Porygon 2, but they go for a Nasty Plot as I go for a -1 Shadow Ball that does basically nothing. My taunt is wasted as Ice Beam KOs Zoroark. I send out Whimsicott and go for Protect and Tailwind, while they bring in Incineroar and use Make It Rain to KO my Whimsicott. I'm down to my last 2 Pokemon now, Ursaluna and Goldengo. They switch Incineroar back out as I Nasty Plot, but their Make It Rain crits my Goldengo, leaving me with only about 30% health. However, because of the damage I've dealt and the damage that Life Orb has done to the Goldengo, and my new special attack boost, both of my Pokemon can KO both of my opponents. They protect Goldengo and block a Shadow Ball, but Blood Moon KOs Porygon. Incineroar comes
normal.
back out and fake outs Goldengo, but Earth Power finishes off their Goldengo. And with 2 Pokemon left against just their Incineroar,
Easy.
I win game 2. This set will be determined by game 3. My opponent once again switches their leads. It's Incineroar and Flamigo this time. On my end, it looks like I'm leading Goldengo and Ursaluna again. But is that really what's going on here? It's time for another round of Is It Zoroark? What do you think, folks? Games 1 and 2 featured Ursaluna as a secret L'Oreal hair model.
Because I'm worth it.
Is it once again the false bear? The turn begins with Goldango moving first and using Icy Wind. Earth Power KOs Incineroar before it can move, while Flamigo Close Combat hits Goldango and drops it to the secret Focus Sash that revealing its true nature. Porygon 2 is sent out. They switch Flamigo out to Goldango as I protect Ursaluna and taunt Porygon 2, preventing Trick Room. And although they do go for Ice Beam, it lands into the Protect. We both Terrastalize. My Ursaluna to normal, their Porygon 2 to fighting, and Goldango protects. I Icy Wind and Terra Normal Blood Moon KOs Porygon 2, putting me in the lead 4 against 2. My opponent is forced back into Flamigo, and they think that their only way to win is with a double protect and a likely Tailwind. Their double protect fails, but I didn't even go after Goldango because I knew they would go for this. Icy Wind and Hyper Voice work together to KO Flamigo, and now down 1 against 4, my opponent forfeits. I win game 3 and round number 2. At this point, Yuki is also 2-0, and Aaron is 1-1. It's a strong start for the squad, but the day is still young. Remember, we each need 6 wins to make day 2, and 10 wins out of 12 between day 1 and day 2 to make top cut. So we've still got a ways to go. Round 3 goes up, and I realize that this is going to be the first test of my team's tech, because I'm facing off against King Gambit. It's supported by Electabuzz with Follow Me, and Sneasler with both Coaching and Fake Out. This is a difficult matchup, and it's time to find out if my team really does have the tools to handle it. Game 1 begins with my Incineroar and Ursaluna against my opponent's Electabuzz and King Gambit. Intimidate lowers King Gambit's attack to -1, which then activates Defiant, giving it 2 stages of increased attack, ending up with +1 attack. Then Mirror Herb activates, getting consumed and copying the +2 attack boost. In the end, Incineroar is at +2 attack, and King Gambit is at +1 attack, and neither of us have selected a move yet. They protect both their Pokemon as I go for Fake Out and Blood Moon. This time, there's no Zoroark. But even though I didn't do damage, I still made a good move, because I didn't reveal which of my Pokemon was faster. From my opponent's perspective, my Ursaluna could be faster than my own Incineroar, and that forces them to go for Follow Me and Terra Dark, which covers for the possibility that Ursaluna would KO Electabuzz, which would then let Incineroar KO King Gambit. However, my Incineroar is faster, so Knock Off and Hyper Voice KO Electabuzz, and also do good damage to King Gambit. They go for Kowtow Cleave into Incineroar for over half of my health. Sneasler replaces Electabuzz. I reposition, switching Whimsicott in and protecting to block with close combat. With the threat of Tailwind online, this pressures them to switch King Gambit out to Rillaboom as I Tailwind and Hyper Voice, before feinting to close combat from Sneasler. Finally, it's time for Dragonite's first appearance. This turn I need to watch out for Fake Out, so I protect, and Moonblast KOs Sneasler, forcing King Gambit back out. And now I have a guaranteed win. I Encore Rillaboom into Fake Out and KO King Gambit with Terra Fighting Low Kick, winning me game 1. That worked pretty well, so game 2 I'm running it back. Same Pokemon, same order. But my opponent makes an adjustment. They've led off with Volcarona and Sneasler. Because with Fairy Terra, it matches up a little bit too well into Dragonite for my liking. I'm worried about Quiver Dance, so I switch Ursaluna out into Whimsicott, and Sneasler launches a close combat into Incineroar, activating Poison Touch and leaving it with 30 HP, before Volcarona uses Heat Wave, putting Incineroar down to 4 HP, and Whimsicott just barely out of range of red. I Parting Shot and bring out Dragonite, but this turn was a disaster. Volcarona Terrace to Fairy. I go for Tailwind and try and Scale Shot the Sneasler, but it misses. And that means the Fire Claw can hit Dragonite, which breaks Multiscale, and gets the Paralysis. And because Multiscale was broken, the -1 special attack Terra Blast does a ton, actually twice as much as it would have otherwise, and leaves me with low yellow HP. At this point, I'm just too far behind. I KO Sneasler and sacrifice Dragonite, and then KO Electabuzz, there's Luna, but I've just lost way too many resources. Once again, I'm going to game 3, with Whimsicott and Ursaluna lead. My opponent goes with Sneasler and Volcarona once more.
Sneasler, Volcarona, ok.
Et
en fait, Electabuzz, c'est fort de ouf. Hein. Dire Claw, oh, ça one-shot direct. Ah, c'est poison contre Fée Plante.
I mean, I do have Tailwind up, so Ursaluna can use Hyper Voice before Sneasler moves, and that will do a ton of damage. But because of the Focus Sash, I still need 2 attacks, not 1, so how does this help? Well, Follow Me has +2 priority, and Extreme Speed is faster than other priority moves. It actually also has +2 priority. In other words, whichever moves first will be determined by which Pokemon is faster, and I have Tailwind. The turn begins, and Extreme Speed is the first to move, hitting the Sneasler. Electabuzz then goes for Follow Me, but it's too late. Hyper Voice KOs Sneasler before it can attack.
Ok. Je savais pas que Extreme Speed ça allait plus vite que Follow Me quand même.
And if I hit 5 times, I'll KO. But Dragonite only hits 4, leaving Electabuzz barely alive and making my Earth Power way overkill as they Kowtow Cleave into Ursaluna. Volcarona is sent out. I switch Ursaluna out into my final Pokemon, Incineroar, activating both Defiant and the Mirror Herb again. I Terrastalize Dragonite to fighting as they protect both of their Pokemon and Tailwind ends. However, because of the speed boost from Scale Shot, Dragonite Dragonite is currently still faster than Volcarona. They terrestrialize Volcarona the Fairy and sucker punch my Dragonite. But because of multiscale and the Terra, I still survive despite their attack boost and my defense drop. Low kick comes out and KOs Kingambit in one hit.
Oh lol. Oh, c'est beau ça. C'est beau.
And it has +2 attack. Flare Blitz one-hit KOs Volcarona. I win game 3 and round 3. Yuki and Aaron both won as well, but we don't have much time to chat before the 4th round goes live. This time, I'm up against a Sun team. With both Torkoal and Sunny Day Whimsicott, they're definitely looking forward to clear skies. And it makes sense because their Hisuian Typhlosion, Hisuian Lilligant, and Incineroar all get stronger in the strong sunlight. I'll also need to watch out for their Assault Vest, Ursaluna Blood Moon, who can tank my various powerful special attacks. Game 1 begins with their Whimsicott and Torkoal against my Whimsicott and Goldengo. Their goal is clear. Torkoal will set the sun up and can deal huge damage with Overheat, which would activate his Eject Pack held item, letting Torkoal switch out and Typhlosion switch in safely, all while Whimsicott goes for Tailwind. With both Tailwind and Sun active, Typhlosion can run over my team, but we forgot to play... My opponent goes for Tailwind. The next Pokemon to move is my Whimsicott, who goes for Bitter Malice. This not only deals half of Torkoal's HP, it also drops its attack stat, which then activates Torkoal's Eject Pack item, forcing it to switch out before it can attack. Crucially, that means my opponent is forced to switch something in before my Goldengo has attacked. They take time to think about it. Ultimately, they settle on Lilligant, because their final Pokemon is Typhlosion, and they can't afford to lose health in it because of a
Ouais, c'est vrai. S'ils perdent leur principal source de dégâts, ça fait un peu mal.
For Tailwind, my opponent has lost over half of their total HP on their team in just one turn. From here, my lead is just too large, and I win game 1. Game 2 features a Pokemon adjustment from both sides. It's now my Goldengo and Dragonite against their Whimsicott and Lilligant, except it's entirely possible that my lead hasn't changed, and I've got Zoroark once again next to Goldengo, or that my new lead features Zoroark disguised as Goldengo. You know how it works, folks. Well, my opponent is playing too, and they've decided to guess, yes, it is Zoroark. Dragonite breaks Lilligant's Focus Sash with extreme speed, as they go for Sunny Day with Whimsicott, which allows Lilligant to go for Solar Blade into my Goldengo. They predicted that it was actually Zoroark. Unfortunately for them,
c'était pas Zoroark, et il est mort.
And Make It Rain knocks out both of my opponent's Pokemon. Up 4 against 2 with Whimsicott and Ursaluna at full HP in the back, and multiscale unbroken on Dragonite, I win game 2 in the set, putting me at 4 wins and 0 losses.
C'est vrai que ça, le mind game,
il est compliqué. Collectively, we are 11 wins and 1 loss. A super strong start. Before long, though, round 5 goes up, and I can say goodbye to the sunny skies because this time my opponent is bringing the rain. It's very similar to the team that Aaron Zeng brought to regionals last month. A rain team with unusual sets, including Scarf Pelipper, Focus Sash Basculegion, Power Herb Archaludon, and Life Orb Terra Fighting Terra Blast, Goldengo. The last 2 Pokemon are Covert Cloak Whimsicott with Fake Tears, and Assault Vest Incineroar. Aaron had actually just played against this team last round, and we talked about how it was surprisingly difficult compared to the more traditional rain teams that we had practiced against. He had managed to win, but it was tough and it took 3 games. I'm not looking forward to having to face it myself. Game 1 begins with their Pelipper and Whimsicott into my Goldengo and Ursaluna Blood Moon. They go for a Tailwind and Muddy Water, which does a ton to both of my Pokemon, and reveals that Ursaluna was actually Zoroark. Bitter Malice is over half to Pelipper, and puts it into a range where Make It Rain can KO both my opponent's Pokemon. They send out Archaludon and Incineroar, but they've lost too much ground. With a double switch to Ursaluna, who is fully immune to the Electro Shot, and Whimsicott, who takes a knockoff, I've got too large of a lead, and my opponent forfeits after just 1 more turn. But game 2 doesn't go as well. I try and focus down the Archaludon, who can cause me major issues with its good natural speed stat combined with Sturdy, but every time I try and take it out, they either protect or switch it out. Eventually, they've chipped away enough of my other Pokemon to allow Terra Electric Archaludon inside of Tailwind to tear through my team, and I lose game 2. I have got to win game 3. My opponent goes with a new lead, Whimsicott and Archaludon against the same lead from me for the 3rd time, Goldengo and Ursaluna Blood Moon. The last 2 games, though, this lead was an illusion. While it looked like Goldengo and Ursaluna, it was actually Goldengo and Zoroark. Now, in this crucial moment in game 3, we must once again play... My opponent thinks that it's not, that Ursaluna is really Ursaluna, and that Goldengo is really Goldengo, and so they make a play to call my bluff. They terrestrialize Whimsicott to steal, just in case, and they go for Fake Tears into Ursaluna. Now, Archaludon can go for Draco Meteor to KO Ursaluna, except Archaludon isn't the next Pokemon to move, it's Goldengo, and it goes for Icy Wind. Archaludon's speed drops, and crucially, Sturdy is broken, which means that my Earth Power can KO it before it can attack. My opponent's Terra and the Pokemon that destroyed me last game, and the only damage I took in exchange was a little bit of Life Orb chip. This is a lead that I've got no intention of letting go of. I reposition Whimsicott in for Ursaluna, taking a Muddy Water, but now I can go for Tailwind. I sacrifice Zoroark to get Ursaluna in and catch Pelipper on the turn and switches back in for a KO, leaving my opponent with only Incineroar and Whimsicott. They forfeit, knowing that they can't win with only their support Pokemon left, and I win round 5. 1 more win and I'll make it 2. But I have been in spots like these before, and I've lost every one of my remaining games to miss out, so I'm not feeling relaxed just yet. And adding to the pressure is the fact that my next match will be played on stream. I am feeling nervous, but that actually doesn't matter here, because I'm not the one who's going to be playing this round. Instead, I'm tagging in a friend who's new to the scene, but I think has a ton of potential. Please allow me to introduce you to my good friend, Golf Willet. As Golf and his opponent get set up, we can take a look at the matchup. Our opponent here is using a team extremely similar to the one that won Frankfurt a couple weeks ago.
Alola, Drake, Riaboom, Goldengo, Salena Blue Moon, Sneasler, Basic.
Terra Electric, Ursaluna Blood Moon. This is not a bad matchup. In fact, my professional opinion is that it's at worst neutral and at best favored. But there is a problem with this matchup. My understanding is that you're not supposed to bring Zoroark. It's time for the battle to start. Wait, didn't I just say that Zoroark wasn't good here? What's it doing in the lead? Well, it appears that Golf is something of a showman and wasn't willing to leave behind the start of the show. He knows what the audience wants to see, and boy golly is he gonna give it to them. Of course, there is a problem, which is that Zoroark is not good here at all. It can't do anything to Incineroar, and neither can Goldengo. While it can damage Sneasler for about half its health, Sneasler can also break Zoroark's Focus Sash. It's certainly not an awful position, but I would not say that it's a good one either. So, Golf decides to make a hard read. Goldengo terrestrializes terastallizes to water as Sneasler protects. But instead of going after Sneasler, Whimsicott's Bitter Malice hits Incineroar. Not for the damage, but for the attack drop, as Goldengo doubles its special attack with Nasty Plot. Incineroar finishes the turn with a knockoff, but it does way less between the Terra and the attack drop. Time to step on the gas.
This Make It Rain is really going to hurt whatever comes in unless it resists steel-type attacks. And yes, the Rillaboom's holding an Assault Vest, but it's not terastallized into a Fire-type. It's still going to take some big damage this turn.
What this does do is give the Sneasler the Unburden boost. So the Grassy Seed will now activate, increasing the defense of Sneasler, activating the Unburden, which allows it to get this close combat up first. 6 hit points remaining on the Goldengo. Will survive just barely as Zoroark gets another Icy Wind off. That's going to deal decent damage to both Pokemon and free up this Goldengo to fire off a huge Make It Rain.
Make It Rain. Oh là 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 là, le Rillaboom. Il pleure, hein. Il pleure, le Rillaboom.
So Icy Wind wouldn't slow it down.
Gabby is right. Without that switch, Zoroark would have outsped Sneasler, enabled Goldengo to knock it out before it could attack. But the problem is that even with the switch, the position still isn't great. With Sneasler knocked out and Rillaboom at low HP, both have solidified a massive lead in just 2 turns. Not bad for a first tournament appearance. Ninetales hits the field, replacing Sneasler. The game is not over. Grassy Glide will KO Goldengo, and if my opponent terastallizes their low HP Rillaboom, they will survive an Icy Wind. There's also a chance that Icy Wind doesn't do enough damage to Ninetales to actually break the Focus Sash after Grassy Terrain's healing. So even though Golf has certainly solidified a lead, this game is not over. Because Goldengo is kind of just a sitting duck at this point, it makes sense to just attack with it. Even if Protect works this turn, it'll just go down next turn to either Grassy Glide or Fake Out from Incineroar. Rillaboom goes for Grassy Glide, but into Whimsicott. The illusion is shattered. Wolf Lick is actually Wolf Lick? Huh? Icy Wind KOs Rillaboom and drops Ninetales' speed, breaking the Focus Sash in the process. And Make It Rain follows up with a KO.
Oh lolo.
I have 4 Pokemon left against just Incineroar, and I find a guaranteed way to close out game 1, revealing that their Incineroar is faster than my Ursaluna in the process. That game went well, but I had to make 2 aggressive calls in order to win, getting the Protect read right in turn 1, the turn that I just attacked. So I don't want to lead the same Pokemon again, and neither does my opponent. Game 2 begins with 2 new leads. My Whimsicott and Ursaluna against their Goldengo and Incineroar. Since I'm the bottom player on stream, you can tell immediately that neither of my Pokemon is Zoroark, but my opponent doesn't know that. This position is, unfortunately, not great. Fake Out can stop Ursaluna from moving, while Goldengo can go for a Make It Rain to KO Whimsicott. Unfortunately, without any tricks up my sleeve, I can only play defensive on this turn. But my opponent reads this passive play, and switches Incineroar out to Rillaboom, maintaining Fake Out pressure on the second turn. I Tailwind, but Make It Rain KOs Whimsicott in exchange. That is a bad trade, because I just protected Ursaluna, and my opponent still has Fake Out active. Ursaluna being weak to grass means that next turn I still have to worry about Grassy Glide, even if I manage to survive the Fake Out pressure. And Fake Out plus Make It Rain plus Grassy Glide could KO Ursaluna before I can even attack. The way that I can get back into this game is to send out another threat. A Pokemon that demands attention, preventing my opponent from just focusing down my Ursaluna for free. I send out my own Goldengo. I terastallize Ursaluna to normal. Even though I expect Fake Out, this prevents a Grassy Glide and Make It Rain from getting the KO on this turn. And it means that if Rillaboom doesn't go for Fake Out, I will knock it out on this turn. But I'm not the only one to terastallize. Their Goldengo turns into a Water type. My first attack is not Fake Out, but instead Grassy Glide. I Nasty Plot, setting my Goldengo up, and Blood Moon KOs the Assault Vest Rillaboom.
Okay, nice.
Unfortunately, their Goldengo goes for a Shadow Ball, boosted by the Life Orb, and my Goldengo only barely survives thanks to the special attack drop the turn prior. We have 3 Pokemon left apiece, but that doesn't tell the whole story. I have less health, but my Goldengo is set up, while my opponent has Goldengo with -1 special attack. I have 2 turns left of Tailwind, but once they expire, my opponent will have the speed advantage. And we each have an unrevealed Pokemon still waiting in the wings, which could swing the battle either way. If we get a win, I need to make sure to get enough ground here in my final 2 turns of Tailwind. My opponent sends out Sneasler, the worst Pokemon that I could see. Suddenly, my advantage completely dissipates, because Sneasler's Grassy Seed activates, giving it a defense boost, but more importantly, doubling its speed thanks to its Unburden ability. With Unburden, Sneasler outspeeds my Pokemon despite the Tailwind, and can knock out either one. However, it cannot KO both, at least not on this turn. If I can call which Pokemon Sneasler's going after, I can win. But which one will it be? The low HP Goldengo, who's at +2 special attack, or the still healthy Ursaluna? I realize that with Blood Moon on cooldown this turn, my opponent might not feel pressured to attack Ursaluna. If they attack Goldengo, but they get it wrong, they will never lose their Goldengo after all. If they attack Ursaluna and I protect or switch, they could lose either Pokemon. So I make a call. Sneasler's going after Goldengo. But Sneasler protects, and so does every other Pokemon. Ursaluna Hyper Voice does nothing, and now I'm down to my final turn of Tailwind. Now my best
il est dans le mal, il est dans le mal.
Goldengo just protected, so my opponent can target it safely. Ursaluna can only KO one of my opponent's Pokemon, but with Tailwind ending, they'll once again have the speed advantage, and they can then revenge KO. So no
Faut qu'il tue. Ah bah non, il va pas switch.
And attack with Ursaluna, but I think that my opponent knows this too. And so instead of making the obvious play of going after Goldengo, I think they're going to predict me to switch Goldengo, so they'll attack Ursaluna instead. And so I decide to do something incredibly risky. The turn begins with a switch, but it isn't my Goldengo, but my Ursaluna. My opponent went all in on punishing my switch, but it backfired, because my Goldengo is still alive, and Zoroark still has its Focus Sash.
Oh là là, il arrive!
Even if I lost Goldengo or the Focus Sash on that turn, I could still win with Icy Wind, allowing Ursaluna to close out the game. Here though, thankfully,
Icy Wind plus
my
une
opponent sends
attaque.
out their final Pokemon, Incineroar. I protect both of my Pokemon, trying to get their Goldengo to protect, but my opponent just attacks. Unfortunately, now they are safe to protect, and they go for it as I launch an Icy Wind and Make It Rain, doing good damage to their Incineroar, but losing my Goldengo in the process. Importantly, with the Icy Wind hitting Incineroar, Ursaluna now is guaranteed to outspeed it. I know from last game that I needed this Icy Wind, or their Incineroar would have been faster. What this means is that I have a 95% chance to win this game. If I hit Goldengo with Icy Wind, Ursaluna will outspeed and KO it, and then it will always beat Incineroar. Of course, if I miss the Icy Wind, then Goldengo will move first and KO my Ursaluna before it can move, losing me the game on the spot. 95% of this time, I'm going to win this game. And I gotta say, that's not bad, but I can do better, because I've spotted a better play with better odds. I protect Ursaluna, and instead of risking a 5% mischance, I go for Zoroark's 100% accurate move, Bitter Malice. But it doesn't KO. Goldango survives. Wait, did I mess up? Goldango launches a Make It Rain, bringing Zoroark to Focus Sash. But before Incineroar can move, Goldango's item activates, and its own Life Orb deals the last remaining damage that I need.
Ah.
Incineroar attacks into the
Ok,
protect,
c'est
but
pas bête,
remember,
c'est pas
it
bête, c'est
already
pas
took an
bête.
Icy Wind. So even if it had knocked out my Zoroark here, it wouldn't have mattered. Ursaluna Blood Moon KOs Incineroar, and I win game 2.
C'est beau, c'est beau, c'est beau.
6 wins and 0 losses in the tournament, and
C'est beau.
guaranteeing an
Là,
advance
le
to
move,
the
le
7
move,
game competition. But day 1 is no
c'est
easy.
chaud d'y
There's still
penser
2 rounds
au
to go.
moment là.
I meet up with Aaron and Yuki. Yuki is undefeated as well, meaning that he's also made it through to day 2. And Aaron is 5 wins and 1 loss. One more win and he's in. It's a strong start for the boys, but round 7 is here, and it'll be an uphill battle for all of us. I'm facing off against a team popularized by the 2023 Pokemon World Champion, Jean. It's got a supportive Focus Sash Mousehold that enables both Nasty Block Goldango and Rage Fist Annihilate, while also being a shield for Assault Vest Ursaluna Blood Moon, while still doing good damage with Super Fang. I managed to win game 1, but game 2 is a loss. It's too difficult for me to get past both Mousehold and the setup Goldango. In game 2, my opponent switched to bringing Mousehold in the back, and opened up with Goldango and Rillaboom. And the late game follow me paired with early game Fake Out meant that I got completely run over
c'est
by
chaud, c'est
their
chaud, c'est
faster
chaud.
Goldango. It comes down to game 3, and my opponent opens up with the same Pokemon as game 2, Rillaboom and Goldango. With everything on the line, I'm betting on a Pokemon that I haven't brought yet this set. Dragonite. I lead it next to Incineroar. They fake out my Incineroar and go for a Nasty Plot, as my Scale Shot deals half to their Rillaboom. We both attack into Protect on the second turn, but that's a turn that favors them. They Terrasilize Goldango and Grassy Glide to break my Multiscale. Though Dragonite returns the favor by knocking out Rillaboom with Scale Shot. Unfortunately, Make It Rain finishes off Dragonite, as Incineroar removes Goldango's Life Orb. We've each lost a Pokemon, but the position favors them, because they've got a boosted Goldango, and they can send out Mousehold to protect it. I go into Ursaluna Blood Moon. This is not the Pokemon that you want out against 2 faster threats. So I protect Ursaluna, as they go for Follow Me and Make It Rain. Incineroar launches a Flare Blitz, doing over half to Mousehold. But to my chagrin, Incineroar survives the recoil damage. I was banking on Incineroar fainting there to get the free switch, and now my opponent sees a way to win with almost certainty. Because both my Pokemon are slower, they can go for Super Fang into Ursaluna and Make It Rain to knock out both of my Pokemon. Assuming they hit the 90% accurate Super Fang, they will find themselves up 3-1. And with Ursaluna having just protected and Incineroar not having protect, my only way to get out of this is with a 1 in 3 chance for a double protect, where I still won't do any damage. It's looking doomed. Super Fang comes out and fails? Wait! That's not Ursaluna! Icy Wind is the next to move, lowering Goldango's speed, and that lets Incineroar KO Mousehold before...
Oh là 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 là, il la trick, il la trick.
And now we're both forced to send in our final Pokemon, and for both of us, it's Ursaluna Blood Moon. They have Assault Vest on their Ursaluna, but I haven't Terrastalized yet. I send it, turning into a normal type as a Vacuum Wave, KOing my Zoroark. My Ursaluna Blood Moon goes for Blood Moon and KOs their Ursaluna Blood Moon with just one Blood Moon. Last to move is Goldango. Will it KO Ursaluna with no boost and no item but single target damage? We'll never know, because it goes for Nasty Plot. My opponent told me that they forgot about the speed drop from Icy Wind the turn prior, so they didn't realize that my Ursaluna would outspeed. These kind of mistakes are easier to make when you think about how my opponent wasn't even thinking that they could get Icy Winded on the turn prior. However, now all I need to do is protect, resetting my Blood Moon timer, and end the game on the following turn. I win the set 2 wins to 1.
Bien, waouh. C'est vrai que tu peux penser que... C'est vrai que ça peut être compliqué, ça peut être compliqué. T'es dans le match complètement, tu peux oublier des choses.
One of the downsides of both of us going undefeated is that sooner or later we were going to have to play. So Golflick and Zuki and Inovich head to the tables, ready for one of the games of all time. Mirror matches are stupid, especially when every Pokemon is the same speed stat, and they are extra stupid when Zoroark is involved, as it turns out. I didn't take any notes on what actually happened in these games, sorry. Yuki and I got up to some silly Zoroark shenanigans, but in the end, I came out on top, finishing the day with a record of 8 wins and 0 losses. As we meet up with Aaron, we have cause to celebrate, because all 3 of us made day 2. Aaron went 6 wins and 2 losses, Yuki 7 and 1, and I went 8 and 0. As a group, it's our best performance in a while, and boy does it feel good. We try and go to our favorite pizza place that we've been talking about like since the last Milwaukee Regionals to celebrate, but it's closed for a wedding. However, even this tragedy can't dampen our spirits. With our bellies eventually full, we head back to the hotel to get some rest before the final day of the tournament. I wake up from my delightful slumber. The birds are singing, the flowers are blooming. Okay, maybe not, it's October, but every day is a good day in Milwaukee, and it's an even better day when all of your friends are still in the tournament. I'm feeling incredible after an undefeated day 1, but I'm far from in the clear. There's an extra round in phase 2 of the tournament compared to last year, meaning there's 4 rounds before the final bracket, not 3. Putting 2 of them gets me in. If I win 3, I should be guaranteed a bye in the first round of the final bracket. Today is fundamentally a different tournament than yesterday, though, and not just because only the strongest players remain. See, normally after the first day, all the team sheets are published online for anyone to see. This is to make sure that players who were featured on stream and had all their information revealed aren't at a massive disadvantage compared to players who weren't. This is relevant because most top players will spend at least a few hours after day 1 preparing for their harder matchups before day 2. But for whatever reason, team sheets weren't published last night. In fact, they don't go up until about 30 minutes before play begins. And that matters because not only was I on stream, giving access to my team sheets to the entire field, but with both Aaron and Yuki using the team as well, and all 3 of us being at the 3 different records that you can have in day 2, without any other team sheets available to study, it's likely that our competitors will have spent the majority of their prep time last night getting ready for our matchup, while Aaron, Yuki, and I were unable to focus on any of our problem matchups. While in day 1, our tricky Fox may have had free reign to pull whatever pranks it wanted, day 2 is going to be more of an uphill battle. The first round goes up, and I see that I won't be getting an easy start. I'm paired against Stefan Mott, who's not only a friend of mine, but the winner of the most recent event in North America, a special event in Mexico. He won using unusual Pokemon like Scyther, Sylveon, and Garganacl. And as we get connected, I see that he's using a similar team here. The key difference being that he swapped Sylveon out for Clodsire? To be honest, Clodsire isn't the Pokemon that I'm worried about. Instead, it's Garganacl. This Pokemon is a menace. It is absurdly physically bulky, and with the Morangaberry, it can boost its special defense after getting hit with any special move, making it nearly impossible to remove. I don't have anything to hit it for super effective damage once it terrestrializes to flying. It can be further supported by Incineroar's Intimidate and Ninetales' Aurora Veil, and it quickly chips down my Pokemon with its signature move Salt Cure, which does passive damage over time, and Stealth Rocks that'll punish me for switching out to cure the effect. When I was practicing, I played this team on the ladder, and I lost every single time. This time, though, I have a new plan. Rather than trying to win a war of attrition, which did not work in practice, I'm gonna go with explosive offense. The battle begins with my Incineroar and Ursaluna against his Scyther and Incineroar. My plan is simple. Ursaluna can do absurd damage, so I'll try and use it to tear a hole in Stefan's team before he can put me in the Salt Cure blender. On the first turn, his Incineroar reveals that it's faster, and stops mine from moving with Fake Out. Scyther U-turns, bringing out his Garganacl, but I launch an Earth Power into his Assault Vest Incineroar, dealing 90% of its health. Now we both reposition. I protect Ursaluna, he protects Garganacl. As his Incineroar U-turns, bringing Scyther back in, and I parting shot that slot to bring in Whimsicott. This turn is a guessing game. I can Encore Garganacl, but if it switches, the move is wasted. If I think he's gonna switch, I could go for Tailwind and Blood Moon to KO Scyther before it moves, which would probably set me up to win the game. What should I do? I decide that Garganacl is the biggest threat, and so I launch an Encore, and it stays in. Dual Wing Beat hits Whimsicott, but thanks to the parting shot, I survive. And Blood Moon leaves Scyther at just 10% HP. Now I have a sizable lead, and I go for Tailwind and force Scyther out into Goldengo. The good news is Goldengo can't protect, but the bad news is that's because it's holding the Choice Scarf. And here's where things get complicated. If Goldengo has a nature that boosts special attack, it'll be slower than my Ursaluna inside of Tailwind. But if it has a speed boosting nature, then it'll be faster. That makes finding the right play here a bit obtuse. The best play I can make here changes depending on his nature, so I make the safest play that I can, terrestrializing Whimsicott just in case. But Ursaluna outspeeds and KOs Goldengo before it can move, as Garganacl's Encore ends. With both Scyther and Incineroar down to 10% HP, I can safely clean up the game with Tailwind still active and all of my Pokemon still alive.
Okay, nice.
Try a different approach. And my instinct is that he'll lead with Garganacl paired with either Ninetales or Incineroar. Scyther hates to see an Incineroar lead, and Garganacl being forced to switch in just isn't in Stefan's best interest either. Fortunately for me, I have a lead that beats both Ninetales Garganacl and Incineroar Garganacl. The battle begins with my Incineroar and Goldengo against his Ninetales and Garganacl.
Ok, donc il avait raison pour le
Goldengo, so I can try and one-shot his Minecraft Donkey Kong, rather than letting it activate the Morangaberry and then healing back to full. The first turn I fake out Garganacl as he sets Aurora Veil, and I go for a nasty plot. I'm worried that he'll protect both his Pokemon, so I switch Incineroar out to Whimsicott, as he uses Freeze Dry into his own Garganacl, activating the Morangaberry. Now he has both Aurora Veil and a special defense boost. I didn't take any damage this turn because I blocked Salt Cure with Protect, but now what? Well, there's only one option. All-out offense. Garganacl terrestrializes to flying, but as a special defense cut thanks to Fake Tears. Blizzard hits both my Pokemon, but I survive. And Make It Rain comes out and KOs both of his Pokemon.
Oh lolo,
the combination of Fake Tears, Nasty Plot, and Metal Coat secure the KO. And suddenly, I'm up 4-2 with a boosted, healthy Goldengo still alive. Stefan reveals that his final two Pokemon are Incineroar and Goldengo. Tailwind lets me sacrifice Whimsicott and get Incineroar into position. Now I can safely Shadow Ball for a
de la
KO
B.
while mobilizing his
La B, je crois que
Incineroar
c'est x2,
to
du coup ça
take
fait
out. With full HP
x0.
Moon still unrevealed in the back, Stefan knows the game is over, and he forfeits, putting me at a record of 9 wins and 0 losses in the tournament. Just one away from advancing to the final phase. But that final win is going to be tough to get, because my next round is against the only other player who's undefeated in the tournament. Now, this is a player I know well. So well, in fact, that I messaged him before the tournament to ask about any weird Zoroark mechanics that I may not have known about. My round 10 opponent is Leonard Kraft, aka DeWobblefett, a good friend of mine and an exceptionally strong player. As with the final two undefeated players left, we'll be playing on stream. And as I take a look at Leonard's team, my heart sinks. It's a team that I know well, given that I played against it in round 7, and only narrowly scraped by with my Zoroark shenanigans. Popularized by 2023 Pokemon World Champion Shohei Kimura, the combination of Focus Sash Mousehold, Assault Vest Ursaluna, Faster Life Orb Goldengo, and Rillaboom is a total nightmare for my team to beat. If there's a way through, it should be with Zoroark. If I can wrong foot Leonard early, I might be able to use that to my advantage. Game 1 begins, and it's my Ursaluna and Goldengo against Leonard's Mousehold and Goldengo. However, astute viewers may be able to see immediately that Ursaluna is actually Zoroark here. And here's why I did this. The Ursaluna and Goldengo lead immediately telegraphs to Leonard that one of the Pokemon is in fact Zoroark. Because leading with my two slower attackers together with no speed control makes no sense. However, either Pokemon can be Zoroark here. And what that means is that Leonard cannot afford to click Shadow Ball. If he tries to use Shadow Ball into my Goldengo, only for it to fail against Zoroark, he will fall too far behind. My plan then is to set up a nasty plot on the first turn. A risky play that will lose spectacularly if I'm wrong and he does Shadow Ball, but seems pretty good otherwise. Leonard starts the turn with a Super Fang, but it fails because Ursaluna is not what it appears. Icy Wind drops the speed and breaks the focus.
Il est bon.
Last move is his Goldengo, who goes for Make It Rain and crits my Goldengo. This is a big problem, as now it means a Terra Water might still result in me fainting to Shadow Ball. Now the position is tricky. The most obvious move is for Leonard to go for Follow Me and Shadow Ball into my Goldengo, ensuring that his Goldengo makes it through the turn. But if I predict this, my best play is to go for Taunt with Zoroark into Mousehold and Protect with Goldengo, allowing me to use Shadow Ball on the following turn to KO his Goldengo. But if Leonard predicts this, he can protect his Mousehold and go for Make It Rain, which only loses if I hard commit and launch a Shadow Ball. But if I go for Shadow Ball into his Goldengo, he could protect Goldengo and use Beat Up to finish off Zoroark, getting a KO while I get
Ça c'est que du mind game, c'est que du mind game.
Play. What should I do? I decide to cover as many options as I can. To my surprise, Leonard switches. He didn't want to play the guessing game either, and switching lets him reset the speed drop on his Goldengo. Ursaluna Blood Moon hits the field, as Mousehold protects. I went for Bitter Malice in case he didn't go for Follow Me, and though it fails, my +2 Make It Rain does barely over half between the Assault Vest and Friend Guard. Now if this weren't Assault Vest Ursaluna, first of all I'd be near dead, but second of all, it would probably have Protect as its final move. But here, Leonard is running Vacuum Wave. With its increased priority, it'll hit either of my Pokemon before they can attack, despite Ursaluna being the slowest Pokemon on the field, and despite being a fighting type move, Ursaluna's Mind's Eye ability means that it'll actually deal super effective damage to both of my Ghost types. Now there's an important question. Is Goldengo in range of Vacuum Wave? If it is, I need to Terra. Otherwise, I probably should save it. Now without the earlier crit, I would definitely be safe. But that's not the world we're living in. And here's the real problem with the situation is that
sais pas s'il meurt quand même.
No idea whether or not Goldango is in range. Not a clue. I'm not even like 60% confident here. You could tell me that it's a guaranteed KO or that it never KOs, and I'd have no choice except to believe you. Now, since I've got no idea, I just
Non, du coup, il meurt pas. Il meurt pas. Vu les stats qu'il a montré, c'était 68. Là, il a 76.
As Vacuum Wave hits Goldango, but I survived with like 20 HP, so apparently it wasn't close. Mega Ring comes out, but Ursaluna barely survives. Mousehold does go down though. I am up in Pokemon count, but both Goldango and Zoroark are on their last legs, and I still have to get through this Ursaluna. This game is far from over. Leonard sends out Goldango once more. I need to get rid of Ursaluna here. It is my #1 priority, so I terrestrialize Whimsicott to fire and protect Goldango. Vacuum Wave is blocked, but Leonard doesn't take the bait. He goes for a nasty plot, making my Terra completely worthless, as Moonblast finishes off Ursaluna. I'm now up 4 against 2, but 2 of my Pokemon are super low HP, and if the last Pokemon is Rillaboom, I am in huge trouble against this boosted Goldango next to the priority of Grassy Glide. Leonard sends out his final Pokemon, revealing Annihilate? Hold on, we are so back. Leonard protects Goldango as my Whimsicott goes for a Tailwind. My Shadow Ball is blocked as Rage Fist KOs Goldango, but now I can send out Ursaluna inside of Tailwind, and Goldango is vulnerable. If I get rid of Goldango, I win the game. But Leonard knows it, and attempts the 1 in 3 chance of a double protect, and he gets it. My attacks are blocked, as Drain Punch deals over half to Ursaluna. I can make the same play again, but if Leonard gets the 1 in 9 chance at a triple protect, I will lose. I have no other option though. I hold my breath and lock it in. Goldango goes for the triple and fails.
Oh, heureusement. S'il y avait le triple protect là, ça aurait été abusé.
Annihilate terrestrializes to fire, as Fake Tears cuts a special defense, but doubles its attack. Annihilate survives the Bitter Malice, which gives it another attack boost, and activates the Citrus Berry. And Rage Fist KOs Whimsicott. Wait, hold on. If another Bitter Malice doesn't KO, am I gonna lose this? No. Because despite only having 1 HP remaining, my Zoroark has become immortal. With its signature Ghost and normal typing, it is fully immune to every single one of Annihilate's moves. This is why I targeted down Goldango, because I knew that the world's strongest Annihilate still would never be able to damage my 1 HP Zoroark. Malice KOs Annihilate, and I win game 1.
Parfait.
It was pretty close, and I got an advantage early because of my Zoroark shenanigans on the first turn. I am not so convinced that that's going to work a second time, so I decided to pivot and try and punish the Goldango Mousehold lead with something new. I lead Incineroar and Ursaluna against Leonard's Mousehold and Ursaluna, and at first glance this seems pretty good. I can go for Fake Out and Blood Moon without much fear here. The problem is I can't go for Blood Moon because this isn't actually Ursaluna, so I need to hope that Leonard doesn't call my bluff. Now I realize that if he's expecting Fake Out and Blood Moon, he's probably going to switch Ursaluna out, and so I make an incredibly risky play. I ignore the Ursaluna Blood Moon, and Leonard switches into Goldango. Super Fang comes out, and for the second time fails, as Ursaluna Icy Wind hits both, and Flare Blitz drops Mousehold to low yellow HP, but it does less than I expected, and Mousehold ends up out of range of another Icy Wind. That makes this next turn harder, but even still, that first turn went about as well as possible. We've got another Protect Mind game, just like in game 1. This time, no Pokemon Protect. Icy Wind and Knockoff finish off Mousehold as Goldango uses Make It Rain to drop Zoroark to Focus Sash. Leonard sends out Rillaboom, revealing that he's left behind Annihilate after what happened last game. The presence of Rillaboom here means that there's not much point in me saving Zoroark for later. Goldango switches back into Ursaluna, and Rillaboom terrestrializes to fire, but it doesn't go for Grassy Glide. Bitter Malice hits and does almost half of its health, lowering Rillaboom's attack. But the next Pokemon to move is Incineroar. Knockoff connects, removing the Assault Vest from Ursaluna, and to top it all off, High Horsepower misses my Incineroar. Near perfect as my lead continues to grow. Grassy Glide finally finishes off Zoroark, as I parting shot with Incineroar to bring in Whimsicott. With Whimsicott and Ursaluna as my back 2 Pokemon, I do need to be careful because most of my remaining offense comes from the bear. I bring it in to replace the fainted Zoroark, and now I have a choice. Both of Leonard's Pokemon have their offenses dropped, so this is a turn where I'm on the offensive. I can either Tailwind and go for a Blood Moon to try and KO either Pokemon before they attack, the downside of which is that the other one gets to actually move, or I can go for Hyper Voice and Moonblast into Ursaluna to try and pick up both KOs at once. I go back and forth, Tailwind, Moonblast, Tailwind, Moonblast, Tailwind, Moonblast, and at the very last second I make my decision. But I made the wrong decision, because Leonard has called it perfectly. He switches Ursaluna out into Goldango, resisting both of my attacks, as Rillaboom does massive damage with Woodhammer. Hyper Voice KOs Rillaboom, but this is suddenly a lot scarier as Leonard sends out his Ursaluna once more. And once again, I have no idea whether or not I'm in range of Vacuum Wave. Here's the play that I would like to make. Protect Ursaluna and set up Tailwind. In a perfect world, I would go for Tailwind as he KOs Whimsicott, letting me get Incineroar in. I can then go for Fake Out and Blood Moon into Ursaluna, and then rely on Incineroar to beat Goldango in a 1 against 1. Here's the problem. Leonard knows that this is just what I want, and so he could intentionally not KO my Whimsicott. Then I might still be in range of Vacuum Wave, but I'm not sure. I feel like there must be a guaranteed win here, but I'm just not seeing it, and my time is getting lower and lower. I'm trying to think through all the different variables in the next turn. What are the right conditions that I can always win? I think that I see it. I protect Ursaluna as Leonard goes for a nasty plot, and I Moonblast into Ursaluna. It doesn't get the special attack drop, and Blood Moon KOs my Whimsicott. And it's at this moment that I realize I messed up. I got so lost in thinking through the future turns that I forgot that I never actually set Tailwind up. I had multiple chances to do it, and I considered doing it pretty seriously on both of the last 2 turns, and so when push came to shove, I just thought that it was already active. And because of this, what was a very favorable position has completely collapsed, and without the speed advantage, I've got no options left. Goldango KOs all of my Pokemon, and I lose game 2. And so it's come down to game 3. Last time I pivoted to Dragonite in the lead, and used it to get rid of Rillaboom early. To be honest, I'm feeling a little bit shaken. I don't make mistakes like forgetting to set Tailwind up very often, and I can't get rid of the feeling that I just blew a game that I had the tools to win. So with my adrenaline pumping and my head buzzing, I decided to do what worked last time, and lead with Dragonite and Incineroar just like I did in round 7. But that worked in round 7 because my last opponent was leading with Rillaboom and Goldango, unlike Leonard, who's gone back to Mousehold and Goldango. And immediately, we see the weakness of this lead. Because I'm not threatening any speed control or any setup, Leonard can can just protect both of his Pokemon without fear, forcing me to reveal that, in this case, neither of my Pokemon is Zoroark. I'm worried about Super Fang and Make It Rain KOing my Dragonite before it can move, so I protect, and Leonard goes for Follow Me and Nasty Plot. In just 2 turns, my position is already looking disastrous. My only hope is that Super Fang misses, a 10% chance, which in actuality is 0%, because Leonard only needs to break Multiscale. He terrestrializes Goldengo and goes for Beat Up, which never misses, and follows up with a huge +2 Make It Rain, KOing Dragonite and dealing over half to Incineroar. In retaliation, I go for a knockoff into Goldengo, but it doesn't matter. I've lost too much ground. I keep fighting, but the deficit is too large against a player like Leonard, and I lose game 3, putting me at a record of 9 wins and 1 loss in the tournament, with 2 rounds left to go. And there's no time at all to recover from that stressful set, because we were one of the final matches in the round. I'm thrown right into round 11, and learn quickly that it's another challenging matchup. My opponent has Assaultus Kingambit with Terra Fire, paired with Incineroar and Sinistcha for support, as well as Ninetales, Life Orb Ursaluna Blood Moon, and Dragonite. Game 1 I lead with Incineroar and Ursaluna against Sinistcha and Kingambit, and get a huge lead from a turn 1 Blood Moon KO into Sinistcha. With boosted Incineroar thanks to the Mirror, and some smart switches on my part, I convert it into a win. Game 2 is going in my favor as well. I get off to a good start and use Terra Ghost Incineroar to find myself with a massive lead. However, a Scale Shot miss into a double protect on the crucial turn suddenly has my fortunes reversed, and despite being about to close it out, I lose game 2. And game 3 is a disaster. My opponent switches to a full Trick Room commit, and I'm not prepared to punish it. The Ursaluna and Kingambit get into position together under Trick Room, and I end up sealing my own fate by accidentally knocking out the Ursaluna with a low kick that I was sure it would survive, thus preventing me from stalling the final turn I needed to with Trick Room by using extreme speed to secure the KO the following turn. I lose game 3 and the set, and suddenly find myself at a record of 9 wins and 2 losses with just 1
Après, ça peut arriver
left.
direct. Hein.
I haven't qualified
Ça
for
va
the
vite,
top
ça va
cut
vite,
yet.
ça
To
va
reach
vite.
the final bracket, I need 10 wins. Aaron and Yuki have both been eliminated. If our team is going to win, I'm the last shot that we have. Round 12 goes up, and I see that I'm facing off against another familiar team, a variation of the Frankfurt winning team that I played on stream yesterday. Now, you would think facing a familiar matchup would be comforting, but the truth is, after back-to-back losses, I feel shaken, frazzled, and above all, reckless. So as game 1 begins, and I see that my opponent has led with Ninetales and Ursaluna against my Incineroar and Ursaluna, I think to myself, there's no way they're going to Ghost Terra Ninetales here. Ninetales terrestrializes. So does my Ursaluna. My Fake Out fails. Aurora Veil goes up, and my Hyper Voice doesn't do anything meaningful, as their Blood Moon KOs my Ursaluna in just 1 shot. So in 1 turn, I have lost my Terra, my best offensive Pokemon, and most of my chances at winning. But I do still have a chance to win. In the back, I have Whimsicott and Goldengo. Now, I am really, really far behind, and the only way I should be able to win here is if I can somehow get Goldengo set up, maybe taking advantage of the fact that Ninetales can't really hit it very hard. Of course, doing that requires me to deal with the Ursaluna Blood Moon somehow, and it's not like I can terrestrialize out of my ground weakness. So I send out Whimsicott. Whimsicott and Incineroar against Ursaluna and Ninetales in Aurora Veil. This cannot be good. I can't do any damage, and they can KO either of my Pokemon. Okay, so what can I do? I Encore Ursaluna into Blood Moon. This will force it to use its strongest move for a 2nd turn in a row. My opponent Blizzard is dealing a ton to Whimsicott, but I'm able to parting shot the Ursaluna and send out Goldengo, who takes the Blood Moon. I've lost about another full Pokemon's worth of health, but I have my deficit at just 1 Pokemon. Now if Ursaluna tries to attack again, because of the Encore, it'll be forced to struggle. Blood Moon says it can't be used twice in a row, but the truth is that you just can't select it twice in a row. So Encore last turn was fine because they, probably clicked Earth Power or Hyper Voice or something, but this turn, no dice. I switch Whimsicott to Incineroar, as they switch Ursaluna into Rillaboom. Blizzard comes out again, but I go for a Nasty Plot. But Aurora Veil is still set up, so how much does this even help? Not enough, but that's okay. Rillaboom uses Fake Out to stop Incineroar, as they Blizzard again. But I'm not going for Make It Rain, but a 2nd Nasty Plot. And now at +4 special attack, Goldengo is a huge threat. And that's exactly why I can finally go for Protect, as they launch both a Blizzard and a Grassy Glide into Goldengo. This Protect is huge because it does 3 things. First, it keeps Goldengo safe while Parting Shot weakens Rillaboom. Second, it lets me bring Whimsicott in to give me speed control. And third, it stalls the final turn of both Aurora Veil and Snow. Now, finally, I am in position. My opponent switches Ursaluna in for Rillaboom, but it doesn't stick around for long as Tailwind and Make It Rain score a double KO.
Oh,
Sneasler come out, and Sneasler can outspeed me because of Unburden, but it just doesn't have the damage. I switch Whimsicott back into Incineroar, and although Acrobatics and Grassy Glide hit Goldengo before it can move, it survives, and Make It Rain KOs Sneasler. And I somehow win game 1 despite a terrible start. Game 2, my opponent runs it back, using Ninetales and Ursaluna Blood Moon again. But this time, I'm leading off with Whimsicott and Ursaluna. I realize that my opponent is expecting me to go for Tailwind here, and so I make an aggressive prediction, calling that they won't go for Icy Wind. The turn starts, and I terrestrialize to normal as they go for Blizzard. It crits
Il a pas fait il a pas.
freeze. And this lets me go for Fake Tears and Hyper Voice to not only KO their Ursaluna, but deal huge damage to Ninetales. Now I can protect Ursaluna as Whimsicott sacrifices itself to get up a Tailwind, which lets me bring out Incineroar, providing Fake Out and Intimidate. But the Fake Out just feels so obvious on my end, and I'm feeling reckless. Their Rillaboom switches out into Incineroar, and their Ninetales protects, blocking a Flare Blitz, but I didn't go for Hyper Voice. Blood Moon KOs Incineroar. And
oh là là, Blood Moon, c'est vraiment trop fort. C'est vraiment trop fort.
Winning the set 2-0 puts me at a record of 10 wins and 2 losses, guaranteeing that I advance to the final bracket. However, I didn't earn a bye. The only people who did this time around are the ones who lost only 1 round out of the first 12. So I have to play in a top 16 match to stay in the tournament. At this point, every round is an elimination round, and my tournament life is on the line in every match. If I want to win the whole event, I'll have to defeat 4 of the strongest opponents left in a row. My opponent in top 16 has a new composition with some familiar faces. Ursaluna Blood Moon,
oh, battu Légion et Pyrax. Comment il s'appelle en...
Team are Basque Legion with a Choice Scarf and a Grassy Seed.
Volcarona, on a.
Goldengo or Mouse household, I think that this matchup is probably in my favor. As game 1 begins, it's my Incineroar and Ursaluna Blood Moon against their Rillaboom and Alolan Ninetales. Want to know what I'm thinking? There's no way that they're going to Terrastalize Ninetales here. Turn 1 starts and Ninetales terrace to Ghost as Ursaluna terrace to normal. Their fake out hits Ursaluna as my fake out fails, and they get Aurora Veil up for free. Whoops. The messed up thing is that some of this is actually better than last game because my Ursaluna is still alive this time. So I switch it into Goldengo, who takes a Blizzard pretty well, except for the fact that it gets frozen. Not to worry, Incineroar can still break Ninetales' Focus Sash, except that -1 high horsepower crits Incineroar for the KO, despite having 180 HP remaining. And suddenly this game, this elimination game, is over. With Goldengo frozen and Incineroar gone, I'm never supposed to win. I send out Ursaluna as sending out Whimsicott won't do anything. Blizzard comes out and my Goldengo remains frozen as they hit me with high horsepower and drop Goldengo to low HP. Hyper Voice comes out, but with Aurora Veil up, it doesn't do anything. I protect, and Blizzard KOs Goldengo, removing my last chance to thaw. I'm forced out into my final Pokemon, Whimsicott. So I have Whimsicott, who doesn't do any damage, and Ursaluna, who's taken a lot of damage, and I've launched exactly 1 Hyper Voice, and my opponent has 2 Pokemon at full HP in the back. I've played a lot of games, and I can tell you that this is certainly one of them. I Tailwind as Rillaboom goes for Grassy Glide, dropping Ursaluna to about, I don't know, 40%, but Hyper Voice KOs Ninetales.
Okay.
Wait, hold on. Grassy Terrain and Aurora Veil both end on this turn. There's no way that this is winnable. Right? Volcarona comes out, and I go for the only out that I can see. There's a lot of counterplay, but to my shock, there's no switches or protects. So Fake Tears hits Volcarona, and Hyper Voice then KOs both Pokemon. Suddenly, I'm up 2 against 1. Against an Ursaluna without Vacuum Wave. I win game 1, and game 2 is much, much cleaner. I get Ursaluna inside a Tailwind and use the pressure of Encore and Fake Tears to control the pace until I've torn through everything. I win the set 2 games to 0 and advance to the top 8. Up until this point, I've had no more than like 20 minutes before my next match, and very often that number has been closer to 5. But now, for the first time all tournament, I've got time, and lots of it. They're streaming every single one of the top 8 matches, and I'm slated to go 4th out of 4. What this means is that I've got over 2 hours of waiting before I get to play again. And normally, this would be a good thing. Generally, I like having more time to prepare. But here, the time feels like it's actually doing more harm than good. My opponent in the quarterfinals is using a team nearly identical to the one that I played on stream yesterday. A variation of the Frankfurt winning team. And for this team,
il a déjà
only gives my opponent a chance to review the streamed set.
Il a déjà
matchup that they're probably less well practiced
un entraînement quoi.
And also lets me go cold from
Vu qu'il a vu son adversaire jouer contre la même team qu'il a.
I'm feeling more nervous and less warmed up than I was after top 16. But maybe this is actually for the best, as I was playing pretty recklessly in my last 2 rounds. As we head to the stage, I take a deep breath and lock in my Pokemon to start game 1. The battle begins, but before I can select a move, something happens that I am completely unprepared for. I hear, through my headphones, this.
Up against the Ursaluna and Goldengo of Wolf Glick.
Is it?
Or is it?
Is it?
No, it is the Zoroark and the Ursaluna, so immediately...
These headphones are supposed to be noise canceling. I haven't been able to hear a word of the commentary for either of my other 2 streamed games. But for whatever reason, whether they've turned up the volume in the venue for the stream as the tournament nears its conclusion, or whether something has happened to the headphone itself, I don't know. But I do know that I can hear the commentary. And if the same is true of my opponent, that means that my Zoroark's disguise has been broken for the first time before turn 1 begins. For the first time all tournament, the game has changed. We're no longer playing, is it Zoroark? Now it is Zoroark. And the question is, has my opponent heard? I am, unfortunately, thrown for a loop. I had actually asked before the tournament to be put as the top player on stream because the bottom player reveals Zoroark while the top one doesn't. And I was concerned that someone in the crowd could signal to an opponent when I played. I was turned down for my request, and I didn't push the issue too hard because, honestly, I didn't really think that anybody would actually do this. Of course, I never considered the situation that I now find myself in, where the commentary is so loud that it has interfered with the match itself. It is worth noting that the 2 headphones have different levels of noise cancellation, or more specifically, they have different levels of white noise being pumped in. And to break the 4th wall a little bit here, I'll tell you right now that my opponent could not actually hear the commentary during the match, probably because their white noise was actually at an appropriate level, and something that just happened to my headphones. But now, on stage, with less than a minute to choose my move, I don't know that. And that also means that I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. This lead is telegraphed that one of my Pokemon is Zoroark. I used it versus Leonard on stream earlier. There, the idea was that using Shadow Ball into Goldengo was far too risky for an opponent who could be hitting a Zoroark. Here, it's the same idea, applied in a different way. It is too risky for my opponent to go for Fake Out into Ursaluna, because if that slot is Zoroark, they risk taking massive damage, or just straight up losing a Pokemon. But if you know that Goldengo is Zoroark, then you have nothing to fear. There is no Fake Out mind game. With my time ticking down, I have to make a decision. I decide to play as my opponent doesn't know, and to Terrastalize Ursaluna. My opponent protects Goldengo and goes for Grassy Glide into my Goldengo, breaking the illusion and Zoroark's Focus Sash. Icy Wind and Blood Moon KO the Rillaboom. Unfortunately, Sneasler comes in and activates the Grassy Seed, triggering Unburden and outspeeding my
Grassy Seed, c'est fort.
Bad news. The good news is that I have a safe switch into Goldengo, and Sneasler can only attack one of my Pokemon. If I can guess correctly which slot Sneasler will attack, I can bring my Goldengo in safely and potentially advance my lead by attacking with the other slots. The bad news is, I am extremely thrown off by what's happened, and I'm not thinking straight. Normally, I don't let stuff that happens in-game really get to me, but I guess I can't say the same about out-of-game stuff. I try to pull it together, but before I know it, I'm down to 5 seconds left on my clock, and I still haven't found the right play. So I decide to gamble, protecting Zoroark, hoping that Sneasler targets that slot.
C'est chaud, c'est chaud, c'est chaud.
Close combat hits Ursaluna, and though it survives, Make It Rain finishes it off, and now my position is awful. If I want speed control, I'll need to bring in Whimsicott, but then both of my Pokemon will go down to Make It Rain. But if I go into Goldengo, my team will be too slow against my opponent's offense. So I send out Whimsicott. I need to buy myself time to reposition. I switch Zoroark to Goldengo, but my opponent switches Sneasler out into Incineroar. My Encore fails. My idea was to force them to go for close combat into my team of Resists, and Beta Make It Rain to get their Goldengo to -2, so I could then nasty plot. But the switch to Incineroar means not only does this plan not work, but the game was over the minute Ursaluna went down. My remaining Pokemon cannot handle Incineroar, let alone the now boosted Terra Water Goldengo, and I quickly lose game 1. I am now 1 game away from elimination. and I just lost a game where the turn 1 definitely went in my favor. Normally what I would do is run it back and make a better play turn 2, but here I make a decision. I will not lead with Zoroark again in this matchup. This is a major issue. The entirety of my 2 hours of prep time was used building plans where Zoroark was in the lead, but these plans worked because of the uncertainty of my opponent not knowing which Pokemon was Zoroark. If they can hear the commentary, I cannot rely on any of my prep. I'm stressed, I am frustrated, but I'm still in the tournament. I realize that I can't rely on playing safe anymore. I need to switch the way I'm thinking about this matchup and start playing based on instinct. So without fully thinking it through, I decide to try a new plan for game number 2. The battle begins with the same lead from my opponent, Rillaboom and Goldengo, against my Ursaluna, Blood Moon, and Whimsicott. And it really is Whimsicott this time. Zoroark is officially off the air for this battle. One of the biggest issues last game was my lack of speed control. So this time I'm starting with the Cotton Ball and launching Tailwind right away, even if it means
Tailwind
losing
instant
Pokemon
plus
I
Blood Moon.
Ursaluna as they go for Fake Out into that slot. And they don't terrastalize Goldengo. If this had been Zoroark, I could have KO'd Goldengo with Terra Ghost Bitter Malice right away. Whimsicott sets up Tailwind and then feigns to make it rain. I've lost a Pokemon, but I get maximum turns of Tailwind in exchange. If I'm going to win this game, I need to make these next few turns count. I send out Goldengo. I want to go for a nasty plot, but I realize that the threat of the setup might force my opponent to play recklessly. So instead, I terrastalize Ursaluna, taking a Grassy Glide, but my Shadow Ball KOs Goldengo in a single hit. Hyper Voice comes out, which is covering for a water
Oh,
type
nice,
Goldengo,
nice.
and deals a ton of damage to Rillaboom. The Pokemon count is now even at 3 Pokemon apiece, but this time I'm actually in the lead. Incineroar hits the field. Rillaboom switches out into Sneasler, while Incineroar uses Fake Out into Ursaluna. This means they can threaten to outspeed me next turn despite the Tailwind and deal massive damage with close combat. But it also means that this turn, I get Nasty Plot set up for free. Now, this crucial turn depends on the answer to one simple question. What is Sneasler gonna do? If it goes for close combat, I win the game by protecting Ursaluna and using Make It Rain. But if it protects, I win by using Blood Moon onto Incineroar. This seems like a 50-50. Which one should I pick? Neither, because I have a better play. I switch Ursaluna into my final Pokemon, Zoroark. I've brought it in the back, and although it doesn't have Illusion active, I was playing as if it didn't anyway. Sneasler protects, but so does Goldengo. And Incineroar's Flare Blitz is blocked as Tailwind ends. This play works because now, regardless of whether Sneasler went for protection or attack, I have Full HP Zoroark next to Full HP Goldengo, making Bitter Malice to protect
Bitter Malice
paired with Make It Rain super safe. I go for it. And though Acrobatics breaks the Focus Sash, Bitter Malice drops Incineroar's attack, as Make It Rain KOs Sneasler and does a ton to Incineroar. Finally, Flare Blitz comes out, but Goldengo survives thanks to the attack drop. My opponent their final Pokemon, the half HP Rillaboom. I protect both my Pokemon to get a little healing, and then go for the game. Grassy Glide hits.
Ok, moi j'aurais perdu, j'aurais fait Icy Wind. Alors que vraiment baisser l'attaque, ça lui a permis de survivre.
And I know what I want to do. I want to lead with Whimsicott and Ursaluna once more. Except this time, Ursaluna will be Zoroark. I'll go for Terra Ghost Bitter Malice on turn 1 and try and KO Goldengo before it can move. If I get this right, it'll be nearly impossible for my opponent to beat the combination of Goldengo and Ursaluna. And because of how I've played this set so far, I don't think they'll ever see this play coming. But there's the issue of the commentary, and I realize that if my opponent can also hear what they're saying, I'll lose the game on turn 1. Unfortunately, by the time I've come to this conclusion, there's almost no time left to choose my Pokemon. With just seconds remaining, I pivot out of the plan I want to do, and into another adaptation that I haven't fully thought through. Game 3 begins with the same leads as Game 2. Rillaboom and Goldengo against Whimsicott and Ursaluna Blood Moon. And I feel my heart rate spike as I realize what this means. If I actually had Zoroark here, I'd have the chance to win the game on the spot with my aggressive play. And maybe it's because I'm feeling this frustration that I start to look for another way that I can win the game on the first turn. And I do see something. If my opponent predicts me to go for the same Protect and Tailwind play, or if they predict that my Ursaluna is actually Zoroark, they'll likely switch Rillaboom to Incineroar and terrastalize Goldengo to water. This Terra covers for both Terra Ghost Bitter Malice and straight Earth Power. And Earth Power Tailwind in case they guessed wrong and Ursaluna just attacks. And if I expect Terra Water and a switch or a Grassy Glide, I can win the game on the spot by going for Tailwind and Terra Normal Blood Moon into Goldengo. With my heart pounding in my ears, I lock it in.
Ok, est-ce que ça a marché? Est-ce que ça a marché?
First and only Pokemon to terrastalize. It immediately takes a Fake Out. And though Whimsicott sets Tailwind up, it doesn't help much.
And now Whimsicott goes for the Tailwind. This means that Wolf's Pokemon are both vulnerable to an attack from the Goldengo, which does get the Make It Rain off in a big
Oh, le double. Oh, le crit sur Ursaluna.
Losing both my Pokemon in one turn, getting only Tailwind in exchange, means this game and this set are probably over. That being said, a Pokemon battle is never technically over until it is over. So even though the writing is on the wall, I send out my final 2 Pokemon, Incineroar and Goldengo. The only way to win is to get my Goldengo to like +6 without losing a Pokemon in the process. My opponent switches their Goldengo out, revealing their own Incineroar, and their Rillaboom out, sending out their Sneasler. Grassy Seed activates, but this activates Incineroar's Mirror Herb, giving it a defense boost. This means I'm out of the range of close combat, as I finish the turn out with a Nasty Plot. But one Nasty Plot just isn't enough. Close combat hits my Incineroar, and although I survive and KO back with Make It Rain, their Incineroar survives my double up, and uses Knockoff to drop my Goldengo to 5 HP. Returns to the field, and remember, it's faster than mine. This is a last turn of Tailwind, but they protect, stalling it out perfectly. I KO Incineroar, but Tailwind ends. And with both my Pokemon slower than both of my opponents, there's no longer anything that I can do. My Incineroar goes down, and then my Goldengo. And with that, I lose the set and I'm eliminated from the tournament.
Ça c'est sad.
Okay, well, that was certainly a new way
En vrai, il a bien joué, et franchement, il a vraiment bien joué. C'est juste qu'il savait pas si vraiment il avait le mec, il avait entendu le son ou pas. Sinon, incroyable. En fait, il a trop réfléchi à est-ce que l'adversaire a entendu les commentateurs, et moins à j'ai préparé une stratégie qui marche, est-ce que je la continue, tu vois. C'est ça le problème.
there's an enormous jump in championship points between top 16 and top 8. Like, the difference between 8th place and 9th place in the tournament is larger than the difference between 8th place and 1st place. And so, given that this is the only event that I'll attend in the first 6 months of the season, I consider it an excellent result. And more than just the placement, I had fun with the team. It was exciting to use a Pokemon that had such little usage.
Ouais, c'est bien. En plus, il joue une team qu'il aime bien.
It was awesome to succeed
Franchement, bien
alongside
joué.
my friends. And it was made even better by how ridiculous Zoroark is as a Pokemon. The stories that we would share between rounds had me cracking up, as we tricked and bamboozled our way through. And while the ending isn't the one I'd have chosen if I was the author, it doesn't take away from the rest of the book being one that I would happily read again. Although maybe with a different character. I'm never using Zoroark again after this experience.
Bien joué. Franchement, elle est bien. Parce qu'en fait, c'est un style de jeu qui est compliqué à faire, tu vois. C'est le seul Pokémon qui est comme ça. Donc franchement, c'est stylé. C'est stylé, j'ai bien aimé. Du coup, sur ce, par contre, chat, je vais vous laisser là-dessus. Je vous dis passez une bonne soirée. À toutes. Bisous, ciao.